Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. I hope you had a nice day so far. If this is the first time you're listening, this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And if this is the first ever episode that you've listened to, make sure you go back to episode 1 after this one. And if it's not the first time, welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the series so far. So we're on episode 90, I think. 89 or 90, it doesn't really matter. But we're nearly at 100, 10 more episodes or so, and we'll hit 100. And we'll have to do something very special for that 100th episode, because that is a milestone. And as I said before, if you've been one of these people that have started a podcast, like I did back in 2019, if you get past 7 episodes, you're in like the top 90s, like you're in the top 3% or 7% basically of everyone who starts a podcast. They give up before the 7th episode. So if you went past 7, I salute you. I've really enjoyed this process. I've loved doing this podcast every week for the last couple of years. It's been amazing, and it's allowed me to connect with people and get my message out in a way where people really resonate. And I think that's to do with the fact that it's very personal, it's very intimate. You're literally talking into someone's ear, but also there's no visuals. So it leaves a lot to the imagination, and obviously it's your imagination. It's the listener's imagination. So that makes it even more personal for them, because they're relating what you're saying to situations in their life and circumstances in their life. So they can really relate. And I think that's what gives the power to the podcast platform. So if you're thinking about starting one, I highly recommend you start one. I've been able to really get my message to people, and I've connected with a lot of great people because of this podcast. But anyway, that's enough about that. And if you tuned in for my Always Free show pilot episode that streamed live on all channels last week, thank you. It was amazing. A lot of people tuned in. We had I think there was between 500 and 700 people at any one time, kind of thing, but on the live stream. And it's since, hit over 1,000 additional views as well on the episode that went live on the YouTube channel. So I thank everyone that joined that and listen live, and I thank everyone who's gone and watched that. The next one is tonight, so if you're listening to this podcast, make sure you tune in tonight, 8 p.m. UK time, and just follow me on social and you'll see when that goes live. So what we're going to talk about this week. This week I want to talk a little bit about the process of building financial freedom and the most efficient way to do that, because a lot of people ask me, can I do it this order, that order? Can I skip this, jump this? And they ask me about my Tiers of Freedom process and if it's all necessary. And I always say, look, the answer is no, it's not necessary, but it's the most efficient way to achieve tangible freedom, have an objective of financial freedom and actually hit it. And it's the best way to be motivated and encouraged and build momentum to do so. And the reason for that is because it's all tangible, it's all measurable. You're not leaving things to, the wind, which just doesn't work. Now, I've spoken many times about the two phases of financial freedom, and the first phase is really just a lot of people achieved that in 2020. We've said this enough times about the COVID, the freedom. People realize a lot of freedom comes from just being free, right? Flexibility, mobility, choice. And a lot of people moved closer towards that phase one in 2020 as they were forced to recreate their job roles in a dynamic would be mobile and basically allow you to do the same thing from anywhere in the world. But the whole process, everything I've studied on wealth building and financial freedom, when I was younger, there was people who had earning loads of money, right? And they were very upset and depressed, and they would take drugs, and they would drown in their sorrows, and they would be alcoholics, and there was these kind of people who were earning a little bit of money, and they were quite happy, and then there were people earning a little bit of money and were depressed as well. So I realized early on that money isn't the thing that's going to make you happy, but it is a tool that, if used wisely, and you combine all the other elements of what I put together as my Tiers of Freedom process, that's when you live a truly inspired life. And I spoke about this on my show last week. We spoke about wealth mindset. But here is why it's so important. I've spoke many times about the misconceptions and poor strategies that you inherit from your elders, and the pension and saving 10% of your income and all this kind of stuff that isn't the full picture. It's not the full picture, and usually this is what goes through people's heads. They have this goal of becoming, financially free, right? And a lot of people decide that the best way to do that is to go and earn £1 million or generate a figure, 800,000, 900,000, 1 million, and they've got this figure in their head. And then they kind of try and put a plan together, and they go after earning that million. And most people don't have £1 million, so they have to go and put a plan to go and get it, because they figure out, well, if I have £1 million, then when I get £1 million, I can invest that, and I can invest it at, 10% or 15% or 12% or 8% or whatever it is that they're yielding in terms of returns, and I can live off those returns. I can live off of an income, and then they go after the million, right? Now, the thing is, they think they're going to hit the million quicker than they do. And what I've found is there's a lot of situation where these people are working hard, working longer hours, trying to work their way up, and they don't seem to be getting any closer, right? They've got this kind of 10, 15, 20-year goal to hit $1 million or something. And by the time they're 40, they're going to be a millionaire and all this kind of stuff. And they don't factor in something that's really, really crucial to that journey, okay? Which is something called inflation. And without going into any of the other elements, I just want to talk a little bit about inflation and how that can affect the run to financial freedom. Because if you've got an inflation rate, if the average inflation rate in your country is 3%, 4%, what that means is in 20 years' time, every 20 years, the inflation rate has caused the cost of living to double, right? So whatever it is, whatever your lifestyle is like right now, whatever your cost of living is, and the lifestyle that you've acclimatized to is right now, you're going to at least want to live that, aren't you, in 20 years? But by the time you get there, if you then get that, that £1 million or that £800,000 or whatever it might be, when you get that, you've now only got enough to live a lifestyle worth half of that, $500,000, right? You've only got $500,000, which means if that's invested at 10%, that's 50 grand a year. So instead of having the 100 grand a year at 10%, you've now got 50 grand a year. And and I'm not talking in actual cash value, because you will have 100 grand, but it will be worth, in today's living standards, 50 grand, because inflation will cause the cost of living to double. So if you do want the same lifestyle that you can live on, or let's just say your ideal lifestyle is 100 grand a year, okay, you will actually need 2 million in 20 years if you're returning 10% per year passively. Okay, so then what people think is, oh, I need double. So now I'm going to have to work longer and it's going to take me longer to do it. It might take me 30 years, 40 years. And the more time you're taking, the more inflation's working against you and it's pushing the goal further and further away. Okay, you're running up a hill, you're on a treadmill. And most people don't do the maths on this. Most people, they wonder why they always feel like they need more and they feel like they should have more by now and they don't feel like they're getting any closer to their goals, and they get to 30, 40, 45, 50 years old and they still don't feel like they're getting closer, and they don't factor this in. They don't calculate it from the start. So because they're not connected to those numbers and they haven't got those tangible numbers factored into their journey, they're not focusing on the important components of wealth building that they can control. Okay? Now, you can't control certain things in your journey right now. You can't control your age, right? You can't control how old you are now because you are where you are. You can't control how much liquidity that you've got invested right now because if you haven't invested any, you can't control that, right? You are where you are. And you certainly can't control inflation, okay? In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions, as I've spoke about many times on this podcast, is people think that to be financially free, they go and buy a property to live in, right? And by buying a property, you're actually increasing inflation. So it's pushing your dream of financial freedom away. So what we want to do is focus on what we can control, okay? And there's no denying the numbers. So you want to be able to focus on what you can control so that when you know those numbers, you have a tangible goal and you get excited about moving towards real financial freedom, not just this idea, not just a kind of pipe dream, right? So things that you can control, okay? The things that you can control are the rate of returns. So instead of 10%, you could get 11%, 12%, 15%, 20%, right? When you get above 15, 20%, just understand that it's very hard to scale those. So if you ever wanted to stop actually you doing stuff, then, just expect a lower return. So you want to be conservative, right? So, I've spoke about phase 2 freedom before, but you want to be focused on a lower figure in terms of returns, but it is something you can control. That's definitely something you can control. You can also control when you start doing this, right? You can control when you start doing this, and the quicker you start now, the better. And I'll tell you why. Because if you was to, I did some maths on this, and I read a little article here on a similar piece, and I found that if you was to save £1,000 per month from when you was 20. Okay, by the time that you was 65, that would be worth 4.8 million, right? Which is quite amazing. Now, if you just waited till you was 30 to start doing that, and you put £1,000 a month in, by the time you was 65, it would only be worth 2.1. So you lose 2.7 million pounds just as a result of waiting 10 years. Right? Now, let's just say that you don't do it at 30, you just wait another 5 years and you dilly-dally around and you go, oh yeah, but I'll do it next year, and 5 years go by, which is pretty quick, right? Then, by the time you're 65, if you put £1,000 a month away, you're only going to end up with 1.4 million. Now, that's not 1.4 million at today's living standards. That's what you have to understand. So it's going to be half of that in 20 years, right? So it's going to be, let's just assume that you are 30, 35, 40 listening to this. In 20 years, or by the time you're 65, it will probably be worth about 800,000, which would be a 70 grand a year at 10% return, or 80 grand a year at 10% return, right? Depending on how much you accumulate. So why that's important is the quicker you start, the better, because literally every month that goes by that you don't learn how to invest and you don't learn how to accelerate your money and build this structure that I've been talking about for the last 2 years on this podcast, Every month that goes by is potentially worth millions to you, millions in losses. And that's the way I think. That's the way you want to be thinking. So if you haven't started yet, the first thing you can control is when you start. The second thing you can control is your returns. And the third thing you can control is, of course, your income, right? You can control your income and you can start developing higher levels of income or smarter levels of profitable income that allow you to have time as the objective, that are liberating, that are highly leveraged, which is what I teach my clients. So with those combined, you can see how we can start radically increasing and reducing our run to financial freedom. It's very, very quickly. And then when you've got that, coupled with the fact that you've got an investment account that is split into different allocations from passive right through to speculative, and you've got that balance right? This is why I teach my clients to optimize that whole process so that they can scale it up while they're fit and healthy. And once it's self-sufficient, okay, you achieve real freedom, and you can then you can just put the foot off the accelerator and do what you like. And that thing has built so much momentum, it's like a snowball. So you're not having to settle for those low returns without you. You're actually getting high returns with you because you've built the system. So really, focus. The message for this is focus on what you can control and start putting a plan in place now. Because if you haven't got a strategy, this is what you need to be thinking about. You need to be thinking about building up your cash, building up your liquidity, right? And that means cash savings, liquid assets, shares, bonds, investing, passive investing. Then you need to look at your lifestyle and see how you're scaling your lifestyle. So are you spending more than you earn? Are you looking at your DTI ratio? Are you looking at your expense to assets? Are you looking at your are you looking at your debt to income? Are you looking at, are you using other people's money efficiently and effectively? Are you growing your income relative to your outgoings? Are you raising your income streams as well as your expense streams? Okay, you can control that. You can control your lifestyle costs. And then finally, you can control that leveraged income, as I spoke about. You can increase returns. You can learn how to invest. You can learn how to read stocks, which is not hard. It's not hard. You learn how to read stocks, you start generating income. Accelerated, leveraged income. You learn how to invest in the markets. You learn how to pick undervalued stocks. You learn how to manage your portfolio well so that it is diversified across an all-weather portfolio. A bed of nails, which I've spoke about before. You learn how to grow your income in business. You need to have different considerations in terms of passivity and, without kind of sacrificing your own liquidity, how can you launch a business and build leveraged business systems and business income and get that working and still be fulfilled in the business? That is the key. Focusing on what you can control and then working on all of those things, increasing your liquid assets, decreasing or controlling your lifestyle expenses, and then increasing your leveraged income. And if you do those three things, that is the most efficient way to reach financial freedom. And I'm talking about phase 1 within 12 months and phase 2 within 3 to 5 years tops. And that is what we're doing with the clients of Tears of Freedom. So the message for this podcast is just focus on what you can control. Start now. Stop being inefficient, right? And you will get closer to the life that you deserve. You deserve to live an inspired life, because when you are in a place of freedom and flexibility and choice, you will be a better person. You will be able to choose how you give back, how you care more, how you support more, how you live your life, how to be more creative, how to serve better. You will want to do that because you'll be coming from a place of authenticity and love and your true self. So that's really the message for this podcast. If you've got any comments on this, I'd love to hear them. You can either email us at info@jasongraystone.com or you can shoot me a message on any of the social media platforms. And if you enjoyed this episode, please tune in for the Always Free show, and also share this episode with someone else who needs to hear it, because you're great and I know you know other people can be great. Don't be selfish. Share this podcast with them and get others on board as well. That's only going to help you, as well as it's going to help me, as well as it's going to help everyone. So I appreciate you listening, and I'll see you at the show tonight. Until then, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.